everyone, thanks so much for joining me for another episode of Once Upon a Murder. On today's Murder Monday, I want to talk about the tragic death of Debbie Gama. Debbie was born and raised in Erie, Pennsylvania. She was the oldest of 5 kids. When she was younger, her parents had gotten a divorce, but in 1972, her mother had remarried to a man named Norm Ferguson, who had several kids of his own, and so they sort of became like this big happy family, and it really was just that. Debbie Gama was described by her classmates and her friends to be somebody that everybody liked, and she was always smiling or laughing, and she was just a very happy girl. On Friday, August 8th of 1975, Missy, which is Debbie's younger sister, said that she woke up in the morning and saw Debbie, because they shared a room, getting ready, and that she was dressed in some sort of swimwear, and she was trying on different outfits, and she asked her where she was going, and she said that she was headed out to the beach. And then the phone rang, and Missy ran to answer it, and she said that there was a boy or a man on the phone who was looking for Debbie. So she handed it over to Debbie, and Missy said that she spoke on the phone and then said she was out, she was going to go to the beach, and that actually was the last time that anyone in Debbie's family saw her alive. That Friday night, when Debbie didn't come home, her mother just assumed that she had stayed at a friend's house, but it was really out of character for her not to call her and let her know that she was going to be somewhere else or spending the night. So it was uncharacteristic, but the night before, which was the last time that her mother ever saw her, they had actually gotten into quite a big fight. However, when she didn't show up the next morning, when the whole family had plans going to an amusement park, that's sort of when the worry started to kick in. And Debbie's mother said that most of all, she was just really angry because Debbie hadn't called and let her know where she was. And then Debbie had been missing for 2 days, and that really is when concerns started to grow even more. And then Debbie's mother wanted to call the police, and they told her that, you know, kids do this sort of stuff all the time, just give it some time, no big deal, whatever. I don't know, basically. So I guess the whole 24-hour rule's out the window when you're a teenager, which doesn't make any sense to me, because in 24 hours, so much can happen. So, like, but I get it, I guess. No, I don't get it. Maybe in 1975, I don't know, was a different time from what I can tell with how many serial killers were running rampant killing children and how easy it was. I feel like there wasn't that much, like, security. I just feel like at that time, there wasn't as many of these stories out. And so people kind of just, like, trusted everybody. And it was like, she'll come back. No such thing as murder. After Debbie Gama had been missing for about 4 days, a body had been found at Casawago Creek. The body was decomposed, and there was no way to get any sort of facial identification. You couldn't really tell who it was. The body was that of a young girl who had metal wires on each of her wrists, her ankles, as well as her neck, and she actually died from asphyxiation, and she was also raped and sodomized. The next day, it was all over the paper that there had been a missing body of a young girl found. Debbie Gama's family saw this, and her stepfather told her mother, hey, maybe this is something we should look into. And so Norm, Debbie's stepfather, went to go identify the body, and sure enough, it was Debbie Gama. And so this is where the investigation began. They started searching around Debbie's house for all types of clues. They fingerprinted her room, they looked through all of her things, and then strangely enough, they found copper wire in their basement, which was kind of weird because that's how Debbie died. So obviously, because it was found in their basement, Norm Ferguson became the prime suspect. He had the window of opportunity. The wire was found in his basement. He could have easily accessed that wire at work, which is why it was in his basement. So he became the prime suspect in this case. They confiscated the wire, and they took it to a lab for testing and ultimately found that the wire that Norm had was a totally different batch than the one that was found on Debbie's body. So after Norm was dropped as a suspect, they sort of started investigating more into how Debbie got to that place and what happened after she left the house. There were no signs of a struggle, no sort of defensive marks on her body, and if she had been taken or abducted, the police thought that they would have seen some sort of evidence of that neighbors would have heard screaming, that there just would have been something to show that she had been taken. So from there, they kind of really thought that it had to be somebody that she knew and somebody that she trusted. They looked into one of her guy friends, they looked into her ex-boyfriend, and both of them cleared. And so after that, they kind of were at a loss, and there weren't any leads. And that is when a private investigator had stepped in and really got the ball rolling again. The private investigator then had gone to Debbie's house and gave her parents a survey, just basically a bunch of questions about Debbie's life so that he could really grasp who this young woman was, who she hung out with, and just kind of get inside her head. One of the questions on the survey was in regards to who Debbie's favorite teacher was. Right away, her mother knew. It's this man named Raymond Payne. She said that Debbie had talked about Raymond Payne a lot, just as a really cool teacher. And the private investigator explained that this sort of question was on there so that he would be able to see or find somebody who knew a little bit more about Debbie in high school, but from an adult's perspective. And so he went to go talk to Raymond Payne and sort of looked a little further into him so that they together could learn more about Debbie. Debbie's stepfather actually went to school with Raymond Payne as well in high school. And 2 weeks before Debbie's... What are you doing? 2 weeks before Debbie was murdered, her mother and her stepfather, Norm, had gone to a high school reunion for Norm. And Raymond Payne, which was Debbie's favorite teacher, was actually there. And they found out that her stepfather and her favorite teacher had gone to school together. So they had sort of hung out there. They were in the pool together, and there's even video footage from them of that day together. At the same time, the police had actually made a pretty breakthrough discovery, and they had tracked down a burglary that had happened at a welding shop where a lot of copper wire had been stolen. So they tracked down that burglary and learned that the man who had been caught for it had a partner whose name was John Lascaris. And John actually went to high school and was a student with Debbie Gama. So he was like a year older than her. The kid also had a really long criminal history, so he became a huge, if not the prime suspect. And John had also been living with Raymond Payne. Payne requested that Lascaris live with him for some time so that he was able to straighten him out and really show him the right path, I guess, because John had been in and out of trouble all the time. But it really didn't work because John would kind of just take advantage of his niceness and his obliviousness, I guess. And he would just take Raymond's truck to burglar places, to the thefts, and he would use his truck. So it didn't really straighten him out. He kept doing it. To Raymond. Hartman and Lascaris, which were the two men who had robbed the store and stolen the copper wire, said that they had stole 30 altogether. They gave 2 to Raymond Payne, and then they gave the rest to a junkyard. They had sold it. So the police had tracked down that junkyard, went over there, and they still had the copper wire. So the police were able to take it in and send it to the laboratory. Sure enough, the copper wire that had been stolen by John Lascaris and his partner, whose last name is Hartman and first name I don't remember, was identical to the copper wire that was found on Debbie's body. So the suspect list was absolutely narrowed down to only 3 people who had the copper wire, and that was Hartman, Lascaris, and Raymond Payne. Hartman was already in jail for the theft. Lascaris had a criminal history, and they had him. And so really the main person they had to start looking into was Raymond Payne. They started asking students around, just, tell us a little bit about this teacher that you guys have. And he was super well liked because he was so outgoing. He was really down to earth, I guess. And, just one of those teachers that gets along with all the kids. Well, it was a little creepy, actually. Oh, no! I swore I got it. It was said that it was really obvious that he had preferred the girls over the guys. He was a little bit of a flirt. He always had his hands around girls, giving them hugs and whatnot. And he was always inviting students to his farm because he had lived... I know I got you that time. And he lived on a really big property, lots of land, and so he was always inviting students to his farm, which I guess back then wasn't as big of a deal as it is now. But then they really learned some more about that Raymond Payne. When he would invite these students over, it was rumored and ultimately proven to be true with some interviews that he would smoke marijuana and drink alcohol with the kids. Specifically, he was really into the twirlers, the girls with the batons in the marching band or just in the school, the twirlers. And Debbie Gama was a twirler at school. It's actually really cool because they lit those things on fire, which is that allowed in high school today? Because that seems dangerous. But they had those batons lit on fire and they were so cool, and I really feel like nowadays you have to be a professional to do that. I don't think high schoolers are doing that. But anyway, Raymond Payne specifically really hung around the twirlers a lot. Digging even deeper into his past, they found that on several occasions he had been fired for sexual misconduct or forced to resign. And instead of, not making him hireable ever again, they kind of just passed him from school district to school district. And some schools even wrote him letters of recommendation, which is beyond me. I don't understand. And that's just people not looking out for high school girls. Eventually, it was found out on several instances he had given a girl something to drink, and the girl found herself to be unconscious for 24 or more hours. One girl actually says that she had woken up, found herself to be tied up with rope, naked, and realized that Raymond was taking pictures of her. But out of her own fear, she just pretended to still be asleep until it was over. So after hearing that story, it was pretty much over for Raymond, and they were going to arrest him. So once Payne was in police custody, he sort of confessed, but not really. Payne's story was that he had picked up Debbie on the street, and then they went and got high, and that she had agreed to get naked and let him photograph her all tied up. And then he realized he had forgotten the camera in his car. So he just went back to go get it. And when he came back, Debbie had accidentally asphyxiated because of how she was tied up. And that's the story he was going with. Payne said that he freaked out, he panicked, and he took her down, tied her to cement blocks with the copper wiring, and dumped her in a pond that was sort of in his backyard of the farm. It was because of this stupid story that the cops actually knew where to look for really solid evidence that he had anything to do with Debbie's murder. So they went to his pond where he said he dumped the body, and they went searching, and sure enough, they found the cement blocks with the wire wrapped around it, and that was the damning evidence that he absolutely had something to do with Debbie Gama's death, and there's really no question that it was murder. I mean, is somebody actually going to believe that it was accidental asphyxiation? No. So what they believe actually happened to Debbie Gama was that she had met up with Raymond Payne. He had drugged her, and while she was unconscious, he raped and sodomized her, and sometime before he was able to untie her and put her clothing back on, she woke up and she was terrified and screaming and just being too loud, and so he panicked, and in order to shut her up, he put the copper wire around her neck and ultimately strangled her to death. Raymond Payne was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole, which he probably should have gotten long before that. What saddens me the most about this case is that there were so many times where adults who had forced him to resign because of sexual misconduct, instead of doing anything else about it, just let him go to another school. Men like that and women like that should not be teachers. We cannot have these sort of people around children. That didn't process in anyone's mind back then, I guess. So I'm done talking about that. And there were too many adults. One adult is too many that failed Debbie Gama and all the girls before her that were abused by Raymond Payne. Be careful, be safe, watch out for each other, see something, say something. You know what I'm saying? Thank you so much for joining me for another episode of Once Upon a Murder. I hope you liked this one. Yeah.